didn't know everybody.
During that interview last week, Armstrong was asked about that 2001 Swiss test.
That story isn't true. There was no positive test. There was no paying off of the lab. There was no secret meeting with the lab director.
The UCI didn't make that go away?
Nope.
He exonerated, essentially, the UCI, and our information is, and the evidence is different than that.
What was it about what Armstrong said in the interview about UCI that you thought was wrong?
I think their involvement was a lot deeper in him pulling off this heist than he was willing to admit to.
And Tigert told us that Armstrong tried to make a similar donation to USADA. Tigert made that revelation during our first interview earlier this month, which was for 60 Minutes Sports, our program on the Showtime network. Armstrong was asked about that allegation in the interview last week.
Were you trying to pay off USADA?
No. That's not true.
That is not true?
That is not true.
This is not true. I mean, I received a phone call from one of his closest associates, and they offered us the money.
You took this phone call yourself?
Yes.
And Armstrong's representative said what to you precisely?
Lance wants to make a financial donation to USADA.
Who was this representative?
It's one of his closest representatives. I've told the federal government in its investigation on the civil fraud side, so I don't think it would be appropriate now to name the name, because it's still one of his closest representatives.
There was no mistaking the purpose of that call?
Absolutely not.
Influence and intimidation were key, according to Tigert, to getting riders on board and keeping them in line. The impression that Armstrong makes in the interview was that he was doping, yes, but he was just one of the guys.
He was the boss. The evidence is clear. He was one of the ringleaders of this conspiracy that pulled off this grand heist that defrauded, using tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, defrauded millions of sports fans and his fellow competitors.
There was a rider on the team named Christian Vandeveld. What happened to him?
Lance called Christian to his apartment, and Lance verbally accosted Christian for not fully being on the doping program to maximize Christian's performance, because his performance was not very good at that point.
And Christian Vandeveld's understanding was, after that meeting, that if he didn't dope, what would happen?
And Lance made it crystal clear, as did the doctor who was sitting there, that you better fully get on the program or you're going to be off the team.
Another U.S. Postal Service rider named Frankie Andreu testified that after he refused to dope, he was fired and Armstrong destroyed his career.
It was tough. All these witnesses were scared of the repercussions of them simply telling the truth.
What could Lance Armstrong do to them?
Incinerate them.
Ladies and gentlemen, Levi Leipheimer.
Former teammate Levi Leipheimer felt the heat. Leipheimer said in his sworn affidavit that he came to a cycling dinner after his testimony. Leipheimer says Armstrong was there and sent Leipheimer's wife a text. It read, "Run, don't walk." What did she take it to mean?
It's a veiled threat, knowing her husband had just testified truthfully in front of the grand jury, and had told citizens of this country about this great fraud. That it was a message. You better run.
Your investigation showed that there were personal threats made against riders who had decided to come clean. I wonder if there were any threats against you.
There were, Scott.
These threats came from where?
Emails, letters.
Anonymous.
Yeah.
Can you remember any of the lines from the emails or the letters?
The worst was probably putting a bullet in my head.
Did you take that seriously?
Absolutely. Turned it over to the FBI to investigate it, which they're doing.
Tigart's agency was also threatened. The CEO of the Livestrong Foundation, Armstrong's cancer charity, lobbied against USADA before Congress. Members of Congress and 23 California state representatives called for an investigation of the agency's practices and its taxpayer funding. And yet you chose to go ahead. You were gambling the fate of USADA itself on this one case.
If we're unwilling to take this case and help this sport move forward, that we're here for naught. We should shut down. And if they want to shut us down for doing our job on behalf of clean athletes and the integrity of competition, then shut us down.
Last year, when Tigart made his evidence public, Armstrong had the option of a hearing and confronting the witnesses, but he chose not to fight, and he was handed that lifetime ban. In last week's interview, Armstrong said the ban was unfair, considering that riders who testified against him were banned for only 6 months.
If you traffic, if you distribute, if you possess, if you use the number of substances that he used over the period of time that he used, then you cover it up and you refuse to come in and be part of the solution. The rules mandate a lifetime ban, but the lowest his ban could go under the rules would be to an 8-year suspension.
What does Lance Armstrong have to do for there to be a possibility that USADA's lifetime ban would be lifted?
He would have to come in, just like all 11 of his teammates did, and testify truthfully about all of those who were involved with him pulling off this grand heist.
Armstrong is facing a lawsuit that alleges he defrauded the federal government when he lied about cheating to get that Postal Service sponsorship. The suit was filed by former teammate Floyd Landis, and in the next few weeks, the federal government is expected to decide whether to join Landis in the suit. The potential penalty for Armstrong and his business partners is $90 million. The Department of Justice has not made a decision about whether to join that lawsuit against Lance Armstrong. What do you think they should do?
I think they have to join the suit. I mean, we were surprised the criminal case didn't go forward based on the evidence that we had seen and generated through our investigation. So we'll be, once again shocked if they don't join the suit. I think a jury should have an opportunity to decide whether the tens of millions of taxpayer dollars that were defrauded by this team and Lance Armstrong and his associates, whether or not the government should be paid back for that.
As we reported, Tigart has given Armstrong a deadline of February 6th to agree to tell all under oath. Armstrong's lawyers have now replied to that, saying Armstrong cannot appear by that date, and rather than USADA, they say Armstrong is more likely to tell his story to the International Cycling Union, the same organization that Tigart believes was complicit in hiding Armstrong's doping. If Lance Armstrong had prevailed in this case and you had failed, what would the effect on sport have been?
It would have been huge, because athletes would have known that some are too big to fail.
And the message that sends is what?
Cheat your way to the top. And if you get too big and too popular and too powerful, if you do it that well, you'll never be held accountable.